Hello, people. I'm back. Elissa Taub is back. We took a week off of from this live stream last week, so people could actually have a holiday, and we knew that the bad news would be returning. In fact, we've changed our titles on here just to kind of reflect the mood. But anyway, we have there's actually, even though it was kind of a dead week from a holiday perspective, it was not a dead week from a immigration news perspective. Lisa, it was sort of that feeling of dread as soon as that news crossed regarding the shooting in D.C. And it was just like, how is this going to be exploited in order to advance an agenda? And it was, would they go that route? And of course they did on there. But several items that we have in the news this week sort of stem from that event. I hate to make the analogy to the 1930s, but there was a very famous case involving somebody named Herschel Greenspan, which a lot of people don't know that name, but this was a young man in Paris who's Jewish who shot a Nazi diplomat in Paris, and that became the excuse for the big crackdown that led a couple of days later to Kristallnacht, which was a famous event in history. But the timing of it was basically all in the wake of that shooting. And it just seemed like as soon as this happened, it's like this is like they're just looking for excuses to be able to do these kinds of actions, and that is like an old play. It's not anything new. So I'm not making comparisons. I'm just saying we've seen things like this before.
Yeah, and I think that the administration was, in some senses, planning some of these actions already, and this just provided this tragic attack just really gave fuel to the fire.
Yeah. So in the meantime, all this stuff is happening, and they couldn't even keep it. I think the hope was at the White House is to kind of keep the story front and center for a while, and all of a sudden, in the last couple of days, they've had this Pete Hegseth military scandal and all kinds of other news that sort of pushed this out of the news again. But this is sort of a playbook that they have had, and they want to sort of, I think they feel like it's still a winning issue for them, but there's no evidence in terms of elections that have happened or public polling that's happened that if anything, they did what they did in the first term, which was make the pro-immigration position more popular than ever there, and that's what we've seen. Just up the road from us, we had a special election last night in Nashville, in a district that has been so gerrymandered that the city of Nashville actually doesn't have a representative in Congress. But there was a 13-point swing for the Democrats in that district, and immigration was a big issue in that campaign, and it was not a winner. So if there's any hope, it's that none of this stuff is actually working politically for the administration, and hopefully this is going to be fixed at the ballot box in less than 11 months from now. It's hard to believe that now we're closing in on that election, but we do have a lot of things to talk about. There was, I think, the biggest item of the week was actually news that's probably the freshest news, which is a USCIS policy memo that was released yesterday.
Last night.
So why don't we, Elissa, talk? I want to spend more time talking about this than the other topics, because this has potentially the broadest repercussions. But this is basically a USCIS policy manual change that does two big things. So what are the two big things that it does?
Actually, it does three things. And And the interesting thing, just for a little bit of color commentary before we dive into the substance, normally when USCIS rolls out a policy memo or a change to its stated procedures, not only do they post it on their website, but they send out an email to everybody who's subscribed to their email alerts. And they didn't do that in this case. The memo kind of leaked out and then it became public, but they didn't announce this to great fanfare. It was sort of rumors, and then, oh, look, lo and behold, there's actually a memo that says these things. So it seems like their hand was forced a little bit into owning up to what they were doing. The memo does three things that are really consequential. The first thing that it does is it halts or pauses or halts the adjudication of all affirmatively filed asylum applications. So these are asylum applications filed with a form I-589 that were filed directly with USCIS. This doesn't affect asylum applications in immigration court. It's only the applications that are filed with USCIS, but it pauses all of them regardless of a person's country of origin. So no matter where somebody's from, all USCIS asylum adjudications are halted. They clarified that doesn't really apply to like credible fear interviews, things like that, that are not adjudicative on the asylum thing, but they are not going to be issuing asylum decisions for who knows how long. The second thing that the memo did was it paused all adjudication, all action on pending benefit applications, basically pending petitions and applications for people who are from any of the 19 countries that are on the travel ban list. And they clarified in a footnote to the memo that this includes anybody who either is a citizen of those countries or national of those countries or reports one of those countries as their country of birth. And that's really significant because people who maybe were born in a country like Iran that is on the travel ban list, but later acquired a different citizenship like Canadian citizenship, technically aren't subject to the travel ban. But in this policy memo, they're pausing adjudications for people from all 19 of those countries, whether it's country of birth or country of citizenship. And then the last thing that the memo does is it says that the administration is going to go back and re-review applications for people that were adjudicated that were for people who entered the United States on or after January 20th, 2021, which of course is the day that Joe Biden took office. And so they want to go back and review a whole host of benefits requests for people from the travel ban countries, those 19 countries who entered the US on or after the day that Joe Biden became president. And they're specifically looking for indications that somebody might have been a terrorist or have terrorist sympathies or other things. And they even say that even if somebody's naturalized or gotten a green card in that time, that they could go back and re-interview that person if there's a positive hit in the system. So those are the three things the memo does: the pause on asylum applications, a pause on all benefit applications for people from the 19 travel ban countries, and a re-review of applications that were filed for people who entered on or after January 20th, 2021, who are from the 19 travel ban countries.
All right. So let me refresh people's memory as far as who's covered under these under the ban. So in alphabetical order, I will read them: Afghanistan, Burma / Myanmar, whichever name is applicable this week, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, Burundi, Cuba. This is not really alphabetical. Sorry about that. Oh, this is the seven. Well, it's alphabetical for the seven on the Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. So just in terms of the big ones from a population perspective, Afghanistan is a big one just because we've had a lot of Afghans enter the country after August 2021. when the U.S. left Afghanistan. Haiti always has because of its proximity to the U.S., there's always a large population here. Same with Cuba for the same reason. Iran and Venezuela. If you're from any of these countries, it's not good news, but those are, some countries that sort of have over and over again have been hit. Some of these countries have TPS, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and that makes this particularly worse because a lot of these people have been in TPS status in the U.S. and their TPS status is being revoked. And then once that's happening, when they are trying to transition to other categories legally, they are being thwarted from doing that through actions like this. So that's a and if you think that's sort of by accident, it's not by accident. This is the policy is designed to get rid of any legal status that you have and make it impossible for you to get into another legal status through another channel. So that's what's happening with that.
Incidentally, there was some discussion today about whether USCIS will receipt petitions or applications for people from these countries, because the way the memo reads, it's only about adjudication. And the way I read it, and of course I haven't, this memo came out last night. I did see a few people on listservs today say that they did get receipts in some cases. My assumption would be that USCIS would cash the check, receipt the case, and allow you to file it. But that it might be quite some time before you receive a decision. And if you're filing something that is eligible for premium processing, my assumption is that they are going to blow that deadline. So you may, save your money on paying for premium. So let's say you're somebody who's from Venezuela, you're in H-1B status, and your H-1B needs to be renewed. The likelihood is that your employer will be able to file the H-1B extension. You would be eligible for an automatic 240-day extension of your ability to continue working based on the filing of that extension petition. But it's unclear at this point when or whether the Immigration Service will ever make a decision on that filed extension petition. That today, right now, in this moment, that's how I see some of this playing out. I do not believe that at this moment, the Immigration Service is planning to reject filings for people, like not even get them into the system. I think that they will accept the filings, but then let them sit.
And that's probably the same for the asylum applications as well. And, in terms of like unintended consequences, and I feel like maybe I shouldn't even be saying this on a live stream. One of the things that this administration has been doing with asylum applications is kind of last in, first out adjudications for trying to make it, for people, because the asylum applications just are so backlogged in terms of the numbers that when you file it, it's going to be sitting there for years. Likely what they had been doing, I think, to try and discourage people from filing asylum applications is adjudicating some of the more recent applications more quickly. I think their view is denying applications more quickly. But if they're not adjudicating any of them, I guess it's sort of like they're throwing that policy out the window.
Yeah. Well, and, we don't know how long this is going to be in effect, right? We know that this memo will be in effect until USCIS issues some other statement that it's not in effect any longer, or on particular applications, if they're going back and doing some additional vetting of the applicant, if they get through that vetting, then we may see adjudications of those cases. We just don't know how long that's going to be. So it's possible with these affirmative asylum cases that, they may hold them in it would shock me on those if they want to hold them in abeyance forever, because as you mentioned, right, that gives the person the ability to stay here, potentially get a work card eventually, all these things that this administration hasn't wanted to do. So I tend to think that maybe that pause on asylum applications won't last terribly long.
I think they also, they may be thinking, well, we're not going to give you a work card.
Right.
But that's been litigated. That's a really hard thing for the administration to win on, and not giving people work cards. That's in the statute, I believe, as well, as far as that they're entitled to that benefit.
And I think the other issue is that the pause on asylum applications is not just for the 19 travel ban countries, but it's for everybody who's applied for asylum. And so, that's also really challenging, because you do have, I think this goes without saying, right? There are a lot of people who file exceptionally legitimate, asylum applications that, should warrant our compassion and really that tug at your heartstrings and make you really feel for folks. And, to paint everybody with the same broad brush and say, oh, well, all these people, we better go back and look because some of these people may be terrorists. I mean, you're really up, you may have somebody that's already experienced significant trauma, and this is a way of adding insult to injury for sure.
Yeah, I should just let you know, we're looking at this memo, and it does look like USCIS. I mean, they are in a position to the asylum officers, and at least are in a position they are allowed to. They're still allowed to review files. They're still allowed to run security checks. They're still allowed to schedule interviews and re-interviews. They're not allowed to make a final adjudication until the hold is lifted. But it may, I'm guessing that asylum officers are going to be looking at this and saying, it's like, we already are so far behind. We just have to keep working these cases, and we'll just basically get them as far as we can until we're allowed to approve them. So, that's one positive, is that they may be able to still get a lot of work done on these cases, but who knows? With respect to the 19 countries, by the way, there have been some news reports that list might be expanding. And I haven't seen anything definitive on that yet, but we've been hearing that since June, that there were like 35 countries, I think, on this list that in the 19 are sort of were the beginning, but there were others that were sort of under.
Yeah, there were like 40, I think there were 43 countries initially. Do you remember there was like an initial, I think it was a New York Times report back in March or April, where there were like 3 categories of countries. There was like, yellow, orange, and red, and they were going to have different issues. And then when the ban actually came out on June 4th, about 7 minutes before we went live with one of these things, it included the 19 countries, 12 with basically a total ban and 7 with a more truncated ban of just non-immigrant visas. And so it was much less than what we were fearing. And then in the proclamation, or in the executive order itself, it, directed the government to review the list. I think it was every 90 days or something, or in 90 days, and then every so often after that. So there was always, I think, an assumption or expectation or plan by the administration to alter the countries that were on the list, either by swapping some out or expanding the list over time. I know that the Department of State had, for certain countries, I think like Egypt, had gone into the reciprocity table that says how long visas can be issued for. And it made, certain countries 3 months single entry, to try to limit people's ability to travel. And so we were concerned that maybe that was a harbinger of a new travel ban, and then it didn't happen. But I think it was yesterday that Secretary Kristi Noem, a DHS secretary, had this kind of flippant post on X that said that she had talked with the president and said, we need to have a ban to get these people out of our country, and that she wants a bigger travel ban. And, typically the travel bans have been done in concert between Department of Homeland Security and the Secretary of State. So, and the president. So we'll kind of see what happens on that. The hard part is, just like with everything else that this administration seems to do, we don't know when, and we don't know how much notice we'll get. And we don't know who, right? We don't know which countries will be affected. So my expectation is that this comes down, we'll probably get about 24 to 48 hours advance notice. And so I think if you go back to some of those early news reports about potential travel ban, I think I remember Pakistan and Egypt were two countries that were bandied about that didn't end up on the list. But, I would be very cautious over the next month or two about international travel, in anticipation of potentially something coming out, because we know that this administration does not care about preserving the holidays for people who are immigrants. They would, this all happened while we were all on, kind of on break for Thanksgiving. And all of these things started to come down, memos coming out on Friday and, all this stuff. So, do not think that this administration will pause for, as much as they like to talk about Christmas. Don't think that they'll pause for Christmas for everybody else.
No, this is Christmas for them. This is like how they get their jollies.
Yeah.
All right, let's. Anything else we want to talk about on this one, or do we?
Not really. The last thing I just wanted to mention, one more thing. Right now, the one thing that we're really seeing tangibly from the pause on adjudication is we're seeing nationwide, and I'm seeing reports all the time about, and one of our law partner, Adam Cohen, has a client that's wrapped up in this, that people who have gone through, they've done everything right, they got green cards, now they've applied for citizenship, they went for their citizenship interview, they passed everything, they were noticed to go in for their oath ceremony so they could formally become U.S. citizens, and USCIS is canceling their ceremonies because they are part of this halt on work on these cases. So be aware that this is really having very broad effect, but that's the one real practical spot that we're seeing this come up. Other people are not necessarily receiving notices in the mail telling them that their case is paused. So we're going to be monitoring that kind of thing to see how long this is going on. For people who are caught up in the re-review, USCIS said that they may re-interview people. I suspect if they decide to reopen a case, they'll issue a notice, maybe a request for evidence or something like that. So you'll know if your case is going to be affected by a re-review. And for the cases that are paused, eventually, it could be that a request for evidence or notice of intent to deny or something like that could be issued if USCIS has additional questions about your case after this pause. So I just wanted to mention that from a practical perspective.
Also, from a practical perspective, if any of you are in this situation where you're seeing a re-review or you're getting, something overturned, I think a lot of these cases are going to be very strong cases for litigation, and judges are going to have very sympathetic reactions. So, if you are a victim here, I would, I would say that don't lose hope. Go talk to immigration counsel, and by the time it goes to court, the policy will probably already be declared illegal, but or withdrawn. But in any case, that's that is something that I encourage all of you to be thinking about, instead of just reacting and assuming that you can't do anything about it. Remembering that we have three branches of government in the U.S. The White House is only one of the three, and the courts are an equal branch and can take action against the administration's policies if they determine them to be illegal, which many of them are and have been in the past determined to be illegal. All right, let's move on. So, Elissa, there were some H-1B developments today.
No.
I think it was today.
Yeah, it was today.
Why don't you talk a little bit about this State Department ridiculousness, and then I'll talk about the lawsuit.
Okay. So today, the State Department issued a news alert. They kind of issue these things on the travel.state.gov website. They have a newsroom on there, and you can go in and they post visa news. So they don't do what USCIS does. They don't like email it around, but if you check travel.state.gov periodically, you'll see these news reports. Today, they issued an alert saying that as of December 15th, so next week, or I guess the following Monday, H-1B and H-4 visa applicants are going to be subject to a review of their online presence. Now, if you recall back in June, the State Department announced that this was going to start, or in May, the State Department announced that this was going to start for all F, M, and J visa applicants. This was a specific swipe at students where they said that all students were going to have to make their social media public, provide all their online handles, and that not only was the State Department going to review their social media, but really their entire online presence. So looking at, published papers or, all kinds of things that might be out there in the public domain online about these folks. At the time, we were really worried that this was going to cause massive delays in visa issuance. And what we found is that it didn't really, but these reviews are going on and can lead to a greater incidence of administrative processing or visa refusals if the State Department finds something objectionable in your online presence. As of December 15th, these same rules are going to be applied to both H-1B and their dependents who are applying in H-4 status. It's important to know that this is a State Department policy. This is what is happening when you apply for a visa stamp at a U.S. embassy. This is not a USCIS policy. So this is not like you're going to have to provide all your social media handles when your employer sponsors that H-1B initially. But if you go for H-1B visa stamping, or you bring your spouse or children and they have H-4 visa appointments, you're going to have to provide them with all of your social media handles, all of your online information, and your social media will have to be set to public. That means Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, X, Blue, whatever it is that you use, all of it's going to have to be set to public so that a consular officer can go through. And what they're using is my understanding or assumption is that they're using an AI tool to compile social media reports or online presence reports that summarize everything for the consular officer so that the officer can then review that before they make a decision on visa issuance. So this is really important to understand that this is happening, and it's going to start officially on December 15th. Don't be surprised if you go for a visa interview in H-1B status in the next week or so that you may get asked to do this anyway.
Let me only amend that to saying, yes, this is the State Department and this has to do with visas. However, there are some bigger trends that are happening in immigration where these kinds of things still might matter for other spaces as well. And I'm reminded,
oh, sure.
For example, of anything that involves discretion on the part of USCIS, like an adjustment of status application, for example. They could consider, discretionary factors, and this could be something that an examiner could look at. And there's very little guidance as far as what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, except it can't be a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, which means that they can't be, doing things capriciously. They can't be doing things with animus, which again is a powerful weapon for people that want to litigate, which is to, if you can get a judge to sort of look at it and say, this is just ridiculous. It's obvious that they were motivated by animus and by bad motives on here. You might be able to get a judge to reverse it, but it comes up there. And then, Elissa, I'm also thinking of naturalizations now.
Mm-hmm.
You show good moral character is no longer an absence of a criminal record, but basically is this sort of amorphous list of factors that they can look at to decide if you're a good person or not.
Right.
And that really, opens it up to the examiner to potentially impose their views of the world and look at what you've been doing online to see if you are a person of good moral character.
And, and I think the other thing to know is that, the State Department doesn't have the ability to search your phone, right? They can look at your online presence. They can get these reviews by using LexisNexis and other tools and all of this, but they're not going to take your phone from you or your electronic devices to search them when you go for your visa interview. But what they can do is they can put a note in your record so that when you come to the border, you're flagged for CBP. We were seeing this a lot early on in the administration where somebody would come to the border, they would get put in secondary inspection. CBP wants to search their laptop, their phone, their tablet, whatever it is. This, that is still a possibility. And so if the State Department maybe sees something in your background, they're not that sure, they decide, let's go ahead and issue the visa and kind of get this person to the border. And then CBP could refuse you entry if they do a further search on your devices and find objectionable content. So keep that in mind as well. So even though this, where they're asking for this is on the visa application, as Greg mentioned, there may be broader use of the information beyond that.
Well, Lisa, I mean, one of the things that people ask is like, can I just like wipe my social media accounts? And, that apparently is also raises suspicions now if that's happened.
Yeah.
Plus, I think that in a lot of cases, they can, even if you wipe them, they can go on to archive.org and be able to see things that have been wiped anyway. So I don't recommend that. I do recommend, you don't have to post every opinion that you have, and that is probably just all I need to say about that. But it's like, post your sports opinions, post your recipes, post your, the pictures of what you ate at dinner last night if you went to a fun restaurant. Those are all fine. Keep politics off social media, and you'll have you're allowed to have your political opinions. And that's probably, I don't like recommending people not express their, exercise their First Amendment rights. But if you're trying to minimize risk, that's one of the things you could consider, is just keeping politics off your feeds.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, in the United States in 2025 that we have to say that out loud. It's crazy. But in terms of visa stamping, low profile is a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Elissa, H-1B, let me just kind of give people a little bit of an update. There has been on the H-1B tax, the $100,000 tax. So there are two cases that are pending in the U.S. There have been rumors of other cases that might be moving along, but only two so far that have been filed that we're aware of. One is the case that I'm co-counsel on, and that and some of my impact litigation colleagues are co-counsel, along with I don't know, there's probably at least 25 lawyers that are working on this, which is great. That's the Global Nurse Force case filed in Northern District of California. That's in San Francisco. And then there is the Chamber case that was filed in DC. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the American Association of Universities, I forget what the acronym is, but it's basically the association of all the colleges in the country. That's their case. And they're moving on different tracks, different judges, different courts. The Chamber case is actually further along, and they had, in some respects, it was a little simpler because they just had two plaintiffs and very few decision makers that have been involved. So it's been a little easier for them to do some of the things that they want to do. But the Chamber has already filed they've already filed for injunction. They already have or some motion for summary judgment, I think is what they filed. And they have the government responded to a deadline this week. So we saw some of the arguments that they were making. I didn't personally, Lisa, we talked about them in our internal firm chat, and I didn't think they were particularly interesting. I mean, I thought they actually didn't do they didn't do the greatest job as far as responding, but basically they spent about half their arguments or half their argument pages on sort of basic threshold defenses to a lawsuit, saying arguing something called non-justiciability, which means consular non-reviewability, that the judge can't review what a consulate's can do. No ultra virus review, which basically that talks about whether something is outside of the statute. No final agency action, like all these things that are sort of like basic playbook stuff for them, but nothing that was particularly like that we weren't expecting in that case. They did have a declaration, though, that they submitted from a Treasury employee stating that all the money that is being collected to those people willing to pay $100,000, I don't know who those people are yet. I haven't heard about anybody, but it goes into a general fund receipt account. and this is a quote from their response, because such collections are not defined by law for a specific purpose. The money gets swept into the general fund of the U.S. Treasury at the end of the year. And Elissa and you and I were talking about that at lunch yesterday, and why that is a very bad fact in mission for the government, which is because the government might try and argue that this is a fee. And if it's a fee, they have a lot of leeway on things that they can do. They still have to go through a process. But if it's a fee, they have more discretion, and fees have to be for specific purposes. But they just admitted here that there is no specific purpose for this. So they're just putting in this general fund, which sounds a lot more like a tax. And if it's a tax, then the U.S. Constitution comes into play, because only Congress has the authority to impose taxes. The president cannot unilaterally impose a tax without Congress's approval. And that is a big, 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 big problem, I think, for the administration as far as defending this. So that will be, and we sort of are assuming that some of these arguments, that the same legal team is essentially working on the response to our case. I can't talk about some of the communications that I know of involving the Justice Department, but let's just say that the cases are not running completely, on different tracks as far as the DOJ is concerned. What I can say regarding the Global Nurse Force case, it's a little bit different in terms of the strategy, because the chamber case is basically seeking benefits for members of those two associations, the Chamber of Commerce and the Universities Association. So if they get what they are requesting, that's great for U.S. Chamber members. That is great for America's universities. So if you get your H-1B through a university, that would be really great if they win. That's not particularly great for all the other H-1B workers and H-1B employers in the United States, because even though that would be a big signal to the other court, that in and of itself is not the win that we need on there. So we are trying to, if you pay any attention to the Global Nurse Force case, you'll know that there's a very big variety of plaintiffs. There's a lot of there's unions in there, there's churches in there, there are healthcare organizations that are in there, there's school districts that are in there. There's like a real variety in that case. And again, I can't reveal what the strategy is, but let me just say that our plan is to benefit everybody, not just our plaintiffs. So some of the delays that we're going through are getting ready for that filing to ensure that everybody's protected. Now, keep in mind, one of the things that's slowing us down in that regard is a Supreme Court decision that came early in the administration as a result of the birthright citizenship ban case, where the Supreme Court basically made getting universal injunctions issued by district courts. They made it much more difficult to do that. So there are ways that we can achieve what we want, which is to get relief across the board. But in that case, for example, they said you should be looking at class actions. You should be looking, there's some other ways to do it. So without telling you what our strategy is, I can tell you that you would want to probably read that Supreme Court case if you want to sort of have a good idea of sort of what we're trying to, what issues we're thinking about. So that is, I also can tell you, though, that it will be very soon that the next filing is going to happen on our part. Very, very, very soon on there. It will be we're talking days and not, days and maybe a few weeks, but not months on there. So that will be happening soon in the Global Nurse Force case. You will, as soon as I can be public and we file things, and please understand, I'd love to tell everybody what we're doing, but the Department of Justice can watch this just like any of you can, and we don't want to basically sort of give away the strategy to them of what we're doing unless there's a strategic reason for giving away the strategy, and there's not. But I can tell you that there are going to be in the next filing there will be a lot to talk about. There's some positive developments on our end as well that I can't talk about yet, but we will be able to talk about when that happens. Okay.
Greg, can I just, there was a question out there that was asking about an update on the lawsuit, but also asking about these national interest exemptions. And I can give a quick little update on those. So, on October 20th, the USCIS updated its guidance on the $100,000 thing. And they finally, laid out what the requirements would be to get an exemption from the payment. And while in the proclamation, the president said that exemptions could be provided to industries, corporations, or individuals. In the USCIS guidance, really, they only provide an avenue to get an exemption for individuals. So since October 20th, really, attorneys have been filing for exemptions for certain, together with their employer, clients, and individuals, kind of figuring out who the right candidates would be for these kinds of exemptions. I filed one myself. I have about 4 or 5 others that I have in process. It's maybe more than that now, but we have several others that are in process. What I can tell you is that initially we filed these and you got nothing back. Like you sent them off into this email black hole and you didn't even get an auto response. On around November 15th or so, all of a sudden, everybody who had already filed a national interest exemption request got an email acknowledging receipt of the request. So that was actually nice. We were like, okay. Since then, nothing. And I don't know of anybody who's gotten an adjudication of an exemption request. I also know it's been a little bit weird. Like some people are saying they're getting now immediate auto responses, receipts basically saying they got their request, and other people saying that they haven't gotten them right away. So that seems to be a little bit inconsistent. We don't know how long and actually I shouldn't say USCIS. We don't know how long the Department of Homeland Security is going to take to adjudicate these requests. We don't know if there's going to be any back and forth. Are they going to ask for more information? We don't know how strict they're going to be on applying the standards that were set forth on the USCIS website. And so it's right now still 100% murky. The other quick thing I'll mention about it is, you heard me just, correct myself and say the Department of Homeland Security. It says in the guidance that was posted on the USCIS website that the Secretary of Homeland Security will make the decision on exemption requests. And the email address that was provided is a dhs.gov email address, not a USCIS email address. So it does appear that these exemption requests are going outside of USCIS to be adjudicated by some other office of the Department of Homeland Security, and that those decisions will be relayed one way or another.
So they have to do that because the 212F is an entry ban, and USCIS shouldn't have anything to say about that.
Right.
I think they're using USCIS as a just for convenience purposes to collect things, but it has to be adjudicated by either DHS or CBP for it to avoid a different lawsuit on that. So, all right. So, Elissa, we have a little time and still a bunch of things to cover. So, there was a pause on December 1st on Afghan visa issuance. So this was again following the this crime in DC, this terrorist act. The State Department has immediately paused. That's their quote, visa issuance for all individuals traveling on Afghan passports. So Afghanistan has already been subject to an entry ban. And what seems to be happening is there are some exceptions to that ban for special immigrant. So SIV applicants, and a few others that were exempt by the earlier bans. And so it's effectively closing the door for Afghan allies for now on there, which in theory were not covered by the previous travel bans. So that's all I can tell you on that. But there was, I guess, a reason for that. Okay. Next, termination of Haiti TPS. So we were talking earlier about TPS, and there seems to be an endless. There's not a single country, I think, that the administration thinks is deserving of TPS. So one by one, no matter how horrible the conditions are in the country, they are still revoking TPS. So in this case, the designation is going to terminate on February 3rd next year, as well as the work authorization documents. So that's going to be that will no doubt be litigated as well, but that's potentially a very large population of TPS holders that are going to be suddenly out of status.
And I think this TPS termination for Haiti is it's going to be harder to fight than what they previously tried to do was terminate it early, and court said you can't. I think said you can't do that. Now they're terminating the designation as of the natural expiration of the status. And I think that's what happened in the Venezuela case, and the Supreme Court allowed them to go forward with it. So I'm not deep in the weeds on the TPS stuff, but this worries me.
I think you're right about that. They let it go forward, but it didn't stop the lawsuit, because the administration still, under the statute, has to demonstrate that the conditions have changed. They can't just say we don't, we just don't like TPS anymore. So once that, I think that the question was whether a judge could stop the program, before that adjudication had been made regarding whether it was done legally or not. So I think what happened in the Venezuela case, and will probably happen here, is there will be litigation and there will be things put on a very, very fast track with the judge because of the emergency nature of everything. And I can see, and that's probably the strategy now, is going to be that, you can, the status can expire, but the judge can still make an adjudication that the termination is illegal. But you're right that it's become a lot harder because of the Supreme Court decisions earlier. So that was Haiti TPS. We did have one good piece of news this week, so I'm happy to report that. So this was one that not a lot of attention was paid to it, but basically there was a BIA decision in this case called Matter of Yahure Hurtado. And basically, this has to do with bonds. So the ruling restores the right of a lot of people who are arriving aliens who are released into the U.S. and are subsequently detained to ask an immigration judge for a bond hearing. And the BIA was saying before that they didn't have to, that they wouldn't do that for anybody. So now apparently there was a win in this case where a federal district court said that the BIA can't do that, and they have to have bond hearings for these people. So that's a big loss in the courts for the administration, and we take our wins where we find them. So that was I am the bearer of bad news, except for all of our stories tonight are bad news, except for that one there. So okay, continuing to move on, we had. Elissa, I couldn't pronounce this name. I'm not Cajun, but Operation Catahoula Crunch. I love how they have these ridiculous names that they come up with for their big operations. But basically, ICE is now starting a new target enforcement operation in New Orleans that goes by that name. And it's sort of like it's it seems like every city is going to have its turn. This. We've had it in Memphis, it's been in Portland, it's been in Charlotte, it's been in Chicago, it's been in Washington.
They're in Minneapolis now as well, targeting the Somali community there, which obviously the president has been running his mouth about.
That was yeah. If you sort of like want a picture of sort of like this era, that I mean, that quote that he had about the Somali community is sort of tells you everything you need to know. It was completely racist, horrible comment that he made. But it seems like when he's not falling asleep in his meetings, he's running his mouth off on something that I would think his aides would be upset about it, but it doesn't seem like he has anybody in the White House anymore who seems like they're interested in trying to keep him under control.
Or that has a conscience that would cause them to speak up.
Yeah, that there were people like that in the first term. I'm like trying to identify who they are now, and I don't really see that. So that was news this week, and then I had one other on the list, which was another TPS termination. It was announced just around the same time as the Haiti one for Burma, and in this case, I'm just trying to look up and see what I don't actually have the date in front of me, but Burma it's not a lot of people, but it's for those people, I would think a lot of those people have claims. I would say for anybody in TPS, this asylum ban and all that kind of is concerning, but a lot of people in TPS do qualify for asylum, and they ought to consult with counsel. There are some restrictions on what the timing, and it may be too late for some people to file for asylum. But Burma has had a lot of turmoil in recent months, and that you can sometimes argue change country conditions and justify it that way. But that was the final thing I had on my list. Elissa, I don't know if you had anything left that you want to mention this week.
No, I think that covers it. I mean, I think that's enough. I'm just happy that, usually I get on this thing and there's some kind of news that drops. I've been looking, like we have a couple of minutes, but so far so good. So no Elissa jinx tonight.
Yeah, good news there. All right, well, thanks everybody for watching. We should be back next Wednesday night, barring unforeseen circumstances, and I will. I'll be here. I'm not sure who I'm going to be joined by. Elissa will be here again in probably a few weeks or so.
Yeah.
It is. Everybody, stay strong, stay hopeful, despite being the bearer of bad news.
Yeah. Well, and despite being a reluctant realist.
All right. Good night, everybody.